Hi everyone, welcome to the Pentucket Regional School Committee Business Meeting for January 19th, 2021. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to remember Bill Buell, who we lost earlier this month. He was an outstanding member of our Pentucket community, first as a teacher and then as a school committee member, and he will be missed. So we'll do a moment of silence for him. Okay, thank you. Okay, so roll call. Wayne Adams.
Here. Here.
Emily Dwyer.
Here.
Marie Felzani.
Here.
Dick Hodges.
Here.
Chris Markins.
Here.
Lisa O'Connor.
Here.
Chris Redding.
Here.
Dina Trotta is here, and Joanna Blanchard will be here momentarily. Could I please get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, Wayne.
Yes.
Emily? Emily? Oh, she did, okay. Marie?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Chris Markins?
Yes.
Lisa O'Connor?
Yes.
Chris Redding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Joanna. Okay. Could I please have a motion to approve the minutes of business meeting December 29th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Wayne Adams?
Yes.
Joanna Blanchard?
Yes.
Emily Dwyer?
Thank
you. Marie Felzani?
Yes.
Dick Hodges?
Yes.
Chris Markins?
Yes.
Lisa O'Connor?
Yes.
Chris Redding?
Yes.
Yes. Could I please have a motion to approve the business meeting minutes from our meeting on January 5th, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Dean, I think on the third paragraph from the bottom, when there was a motion to adjourn, you got me as being opposed. I don't recall opposing to adjourn. That's technicality, I guess.
From January 5th?
I think it was.
Right?
Yeah, when we postponed the executive session.
Okay.
I didn't realize I opposed postponing.
He didn't realize he was opposed.
Nor do I recall that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call, Wayne Adams? Joanna Blanchard?
Yes.
Emily Dwyer? Marie Felzani?
Yes.
Dick Hodges?
Yes.
Chris Markins?
Yes.
Lisa O'Connor?
Yes.
Chris Redding?
Yes.
Dina Trotta. Could I please have a motion to approve the minutes from the Teaching, Learning, and Accountability meeting from January 12th, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Wayne Adams?
Yes.
Joanna Blanchard?
Yes.
Emily Dwyer? Marie Felzani?
Yes.
Dick Hodges?
Yes.
Chris Markins?
Yes.
Lisa O'Connor?
Yes.
Chris Redding?
Yes.
Yeah. Subcommittee updates. I know we're gonna be going over the budget today, so I don't know if the finance committee has any updates? Okay. Teaching, learning, and ability.
And Mr. Conway gave a very thorough update about professional development that has been going on and that I guess was upcoming, but actually now is today. And so you can read the details of it in the packet. He also updated us on the live streaming, which, as we all know, has the recommendations or the expectations from the state have changed. So that's been communicated and to the staff and parents. And finally, he gave us an update on the literacy, where they're at with professional development and looking at some core literacy program, including a state grant that Mr. Conway will be applying for, which sounds like it could be really a good fit for us. And finally, the review process that will be upcoming in terms of the middle school and high school in anticipation of the opening of the new building.
Great, thank you. Policy?
We met on Friday, January 15th, and we followed up on policies 8, and we started on policies 8.
For bylaws, we're going to be going over a few things, just to have a couple questions for you all, and then we'll discuss next meeting. You know, if you guys read all of our changes, and we'll accept them and discuss. Superintendent's evaluation.
We haven't figured out a time to meet yet.
And then communications.
We'll do our update later on when we're talking about that as the line item.
Okay. All right. So now we have public comment.
Okay, so for everyone here on public comment, what's going to happen is because we have so many people that are joining us, we only have so many people in the studio, so we're going to go in order. And once one person's up, I will call the name of the next person that can hop on. So up first.
Yep. Just so you know, please state your name and your address for the record. And our first public comment is Kathleen Castronellas. And also you have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kathleen Castronellas. I live at 12 Hillview Drive, Groveland, Massachusetts. I'm speaking tonight because I did get some emails from concerned parents over the movement of cohorts A and B to remote learning. And I wanted to just make a very short comment about what's going on, the pandemic, and what Groveland is trying to do and how we can all work together. I do believe the teachers are on the front line during this pandemic. They're masking up to go do their job. That says it all right there. If remote learning was perfect for K through 12, remote would be the way to go. But I do believe, and I think many of you do as well, that this is not the case. K through 12 students as a whole do not have the learning skills and strategies to learn remotely effectively. The Board of Health in Groveland has addressed the post-Thanksgiving surge in COVID. We definitely had a huge surge. I think about doubled. And they have hired 2 dedicated contact tracers, and everything is now presently caught up. We still are dealing with higher numbers of active cases than we saw even last spring. I mean, I think our best guess is at about 44 active cases at this time in the town. It's a high number for our small Board of Health. As a select board member, as a teacher and a parent, I am deeply concerned about this virus and the impact on our students' education. I think going forward, we all need to kind of step up a little more. There is no one solution to the current problem, but I think by communicating more and trading ideas and solutions, we might be able to improve upon the model that we're following right now. One thing, first of all, our Board of Health has done an inventory of the PPE supplies that we are storing in our town hall, and we are ready and glad to share with Bagnell anything on that inventory list that they might need to help stay safe and healthy. In addition, our Board of Health health agent has agreed to tour the Bagnell School while the students are present and make a review of the conditions and the spacing and any other health-related concerns. Another thought that I had is that, especially with the elementary school children, it's always helpful for the parents to become involved in talking to their children about how important it is to keep that mask on, to wear it correctly, and maybe even consider giving your child more than one mask during the day, because the masks don't survive that long before getting kind of disgusting. I think we all know that. I do, because I wear a mask all day. Another thought, and I'm not saying this is something you want to do, but it's for future consideration. If the situation presented where the school committee was concerned about the level of virus in Groveland, would you consider shortening the school day by moving the lunch period out of the school day and allowing students to have a grab and go? This might help at the elementary level, because I'm sure the lunch process is very complicated now with COVID. It would also give the teachers more time to do extra help sessions online with students and perhaps working on digital lessons. These are just my short comments off the top of my head. I don't have a solution, and I'm here to help you guys as best I can. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Ms. Castronellas, appreciate it. Okay, so, Ms. Castronellas, we are gonna kick you out of the studio.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think you kicked me out.
So with Ms. Castronellas now out of the studio, or soon to be, we have Kathy Lagalt up, but Lauren Auger. Lauren, if you're listening, go ahead, come on into the studio, and we're gonna bring in now Ms. Kathy Lagalt.
Kathy Lagalt.
Hi there. My name is yes.
Hi,
Hi, my name is Kathy Lagalt. I live at 24 Pinewood Lane in Groveland. And I just wanted to say a few words. First, I'd like to thank those committee members who voted to stay hybrid on January 5th. While there is absolutely nothing that can be done to change the severe lack in judgment that was made on January 5th to go remote, we need to ensure that it never happens again. Our concerns cannot fall on deaf ears. To Lisa, Richard, Emily, and Wayne, I, as with what seems to be a huge portion of the Bagnell parent body, members of the healthcare community, and members of the administration who are not subject to bullying of teachers' unions, and bewildered by your decision. In fact, that day, that night, and the next day, I was livid and appalled. It seems as there were updates on the school committee website made, but advocacy was originally there under operating protocol. That said, it's your duty to engage in the advocacy on behalf of students and their schools and promote the benefits of the public school system in the community. While this objective seems to have been removed, I apologize, I have a 2-year-old here helping. While this objective seems to have been removed, the 2 points under role now speak to assuring accountability and leaving day-to-day operations up to the superintendent, as well as representing the needs, interests, and achievement of all students. You guys have failed to advocate for the children in their education and well-being on January 5th. Your decision was not supported by facts nor backed by science. Your decision was made based on union tactics and personal situations from the understanding that the parents have been given. While I appreciate and respect our educators, and decisions based on teacher anxiety are not acceptable. Forms-based templated letters pushed by teachers' unions are not acceptable. Your own fears, anxieties, personal situations, opinions on the pandemic itself and how to behave are not reasonable nor acceptable. Clearly, the additional anxiety, depression, inequities that are potentially distributed to children based on your horrendous decision were not considered, or they just didn't matter. Children's emotional, mental, physical, etc. well-being and development are already suffering with this hybrid model. Bagnell had 0 cases. Let me repeat that, 0 cases. Educators around the world know and it's been proven time and time again that child development excels in an in-person environment. The guidance is clear. It's been clear. every effort must be made to ensure children are receiving an in-school education. Again, while there's absolutely nothing we can do to change what happened on January 5th, we have to make sure it doesn't happen again. Leave school closures up to Dr. Bartholomew. He successfully acted previously, and I'm sure he would act appropriately should the future need arise. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kathy.
And we're gonna, same thing, we're gonna kick you out, not because you kicked yourself out, okay, thank you, appreciate it. Okay, so Lauren's gonna be up now, and then we have on deck, Carrie Ciofalo. And Carrie, if you're out there, come on into the studio, we're gonna put Lauren in. Lauren, you are now live and with us.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Auger, and I live at 24 Coleman Road in Groveland. And I'm the parent of a first grader at Bagnell. I want to thank the teachers, the administration, and school committee tonight for all of your hard work you've done during these unprecedented times, a global pandemic. I've always been a huge believer in public schools. I attended only public schools and always believed we as students were getting a phenomenal education, oftentimes better than that of peers that went to private schools. And I don't know if you want to call it a chip on the shoulder or perhaps being scrappy, but I knew public schools had the very best teachers and a diverse student base that taught students to be both empathetic and driven. I was always prepared to go toe-to-toe in a debate of public versus private education. It breaks my heart that after the last school committee meeting, I started to question my beliefs. Was I wrong? Should I have considered sending my daughter to private school this year? Should I next year? Is she truly getting the education she needs and deserves? Private schools are operating in the area in person with no issues. Students are able to get a quality education delivered in person without the constant drag of technical issues. Not only that, what am I supposed to think as a parent when only Bagnell was targeted with remote learning, despite the fact that the data did not support the decision? Now, not only is my daughter denied a proper education broadly, she is now not even offered a fair and equitable education in her own school district. I don't want to have to make a decision to send my children to private school, and I feel obligated to help families that don't have the luxury to consider that decision. It's not fair. I've watched my daughter go from absolutely loving school with a passion for learning to dreading it. She dreads Zoom calls. She's not interested in learning as much, and her attitude has changed to a check-the-box mentality. Natural curiosity of learning is tough when you're sitting behind a computer screen alone. The decision to send our children remote was based on one factor: fear of the uptick of COVID. The thought of long-term damage to our children, setting a precedent on how decisions would be made in the future, and scientific facts were not weighed in this decision. Although a mistake might have been made, I still have hope. I have hope that we can come together to work for solutions, not solutions to continue to just improve our remote learning environment, but rather upstream solutions that get our children back to school. I challenge all of us to get creative. Let's re-examine ideas. Let's come up with new ones. How can we work together to solve this? And I'm happy to be the first volunteer to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren, we appreciate it. Okay, so anyone who's listening, if we have, I know someone tried to come in earlier, there wasn't a vacant spot, it's open now, so we have Carrie Ciofalo, Mike Shinners. Carrie or Mike, if you're there, come on in. In the meantime, Ashley, Tracy, if you're there, I know we spoke earlier, if you want to log in. Oh, here's Carrie. Carrie's here, okay. So Carrie's in, that means Mike, you're on deck. Once Carrie's done, you can come on in. And then once Mike's done, then it'll be Ashley. All right, Carrie, you are live with us.
Hi, I'm Carrie Ciofalo. I live at 2 Old Farm Road in Groveland. And this is my son, Ryan, who actually wrote a little letter that he wanted to read to the committee. Go ahead, Ryan. Nice and loud, okay?
My name is Ryan Ciofalo, and I am 8 years old. I feel that in-person school is best because we learn better. Remote school difficult because the schools and the consistency are hard and sometimes there are glitches. It is also very hard to focus when I am in my home. I also really miss seeing my friends and teachers. Seeing my teachers on the screen is not the same. Sometimes I get really sad when I think about not being able to go back to school. Please think about me when making a decision to return to in-person learning.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you. Good job, Ryan. Thank you. Okay, so now we're waiting. We have Mike Shinners or Ashley. I know Ashley was waiting earlier, so we'll give them a minute. So Mike Shinners or Ashley Tracy. You have to just click on the link again and come on in to the one that Ms. Nafta had sent. All right. And Ashley is here. All right, Ashley, you are live and you're up on public comment.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ashley Tracy. I'm from 37 Orchard Street in Merrimack. I have a kindergartner at the Sweetser School. I come here tonight remotely to express my concern about the manner in which the school board is deciding how to send kids remote. The vote in the meeting last week didn't affect my child this time. I'm not going to lie, I breathed a sigh of relief because I know that in-person learning is the best decision for my child and his learning, not because school is a babysitter, but because it's instrumental in teaching my son valuable skills outside of just reading that I know he needs to gain. After watching the last meeting, I was dismayed that not a single member of those who voted to go remote asked what I deem the most important questions. How is this going to affect the kids? I watched as members who voted to go remote worried about the teachers, they worried about the parents, but no one asked, are we creating disparity between kids? And if so, is there any less restrictive way we can do it? Simply ask, is there anything we can do to solve the problem short of this? Without asking those questions, you don't have the concept of the disparity that is created and is continued to be created by going remote. What many of you may not know is that remote learning and live learning simply is not the same thing. In my son's live class last week, the teacher, because she is truly amazing and takes every single second she can with these kids to teach anything she possibly can, expanded on the story that they were learning to teach Venn diagrams and how to diagram sentences or create sentences. If my son was unable to attend that because of his parents' schedules or horrific connectivity issues, he missed that lesson. You see, neither of those items were part of the seesaw work for the day. If you know, as you do, that the state requires this type of learning, how can you not ask, what about the kids who are going to get this, aren't going to get this chance? How many kids are missing these lessons every week because it's not an option for them? Missing this time, and I heard it being discussed as it's a snow day or it's just 2 days, when in fact it was 4, saddened me, because to suggest that disrespects the work I know my son's teacher does every chance she has to make him a better student. Your superintendent and our superintendent disagreed with the decision you were making. No one bothered to ask him why. Did you and your vote take into consideration the kids you left behind? COVID absolutely is real, and it may still require that disparity, but it should not be the first choice we go to. It should be the last. I implore you, the next time you consider this, think, is this the only way we can do this? And please put the kids first. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy.
Thank you, Ashley.
Okay, so the last person on the list, Mike Shinners. So Mike, if you're out there, we'll give you a minute or so to make an appearance. Then we'll get back to the public comment. That would be the last person before we move on to the agenda.
Okay, so Mike, if you're out there, if you come in the next couple minutes, we'll let you talk, but, we're gonna have to move on with our meeting. So up next is superintendent news and student rep news.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Chair. As always, I am going to defer to our student rep, Ms. Casey Peterson, with an update on the student side of things.
Hi, everyone. Most of the issues that I mentioned at the last meeting remain true. Students are still struggling with consistency and workflow because of teacher and student absences due to quarantining. But I also acknowledge the flexibility of our teachers in trying to make a difficult situation work for all learners this year. Teachers have started to live stream their classes every day so that remote students can tune in. This is a great opportunity for those who have questions or just feel that they need some direct instruction that day. Some students, however, question the need to attend the assessments every day when they continue to receive lengthy remote work assignments that must be completed in addition to live stream class attendance. It is also good that the high school has figured out a way to safely host the PSATs for sophomores and juniors, since this test is so important in preparing the students for SATs and because it also opens up many scholarship opportunities. It worked out well with the ability to have remote learning on any given day so that the school facility can be used as an in-person testing site for sophomores and juniors, while the freshmen and seniors do not miss a day of school. Also, our winter sports teams are all back from quarantine, which is great, as the COVID protocol system is proving to be effective. Students are hopeful that the spring activities that we missed last year will be able to occur this year with the necessary precautions in place. Lastly, students are very appreciative of how hard the teachers are working to make this year easier and as normal as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey.
Thanks, Casey.
And Madam Chair, from the superintendent side of things, first, I want to give a shout out. Elizabeth Murray, Julian DePaulo, Jonathan Rhodes, Timothy Frank, and Audrey Hackett. They all had their work accepted by the Mass Art Education Foundation, and it will be judged later on, and there'll be a whole exhibition of the artwork. So, congratulations to those art students. Yeah, I mean, there were some great pieces. And I apologize. I think, Timothy, yours I wasn't able to put out on the Twitter that I posted because it only accepts 4 pictures. But great. I mean, I could never dream of doing this stuff, you guys. Incredible talent. So thank you for that. Just also some information. Combined access. We haven't talked about this. We talk about this every meeting, but I'm just going to give an update. And I believe today I've not been able to check in with Nurse for Erosion, but they were going to do the Binax training. That means by the end of this week, we have the tests, we are trained. So by the end of this week, we should be able to start conducting Binax Now tests. Now, it's not for anyone. This is not testing that can be done for anyone in any one of the towns. It's not testing that can be done for anybody in the school. It's only testing for people who are symptomatic and are sent down to the nurse. The purpose behind this is because if someone is symptomatic, they go to the nurse, could be a staff member, it could be a student. They go down to the nurse where they would go anyway. The nurse would be able to provide that test if they're given permission to do so. Provide the test and it would say right there, in 15 minutes, is it a positive or negative? And that's an antigen, sorry, that's not an antigen. Anyways, it's a rapid test. So that still needs to be confirmed by PCR test. So because of that, if it does come up positive, that gives us the immediate ability to do contact tracing right there and then. So that would be a huge benefit. So that's my next testing. Again, by the end of this week, we should be able to have that in place. Another type of testing that was in a webinar last week about, and there's enough follow-up webinar, and I submitted a notice of interest to the state on this. It's called pooled testing. Essentially what pooled testing allows is they'll test a group of individuals. Could be a classroom. I don't know if this, not clear the maximums yet. But you could have a classroom of individuals, gets tested. It all goes into one petri dish, for lack of a better term, but one container. That container gets sent, and if it comes back negative, obviously it's negative. If it comes back positive, they actually in this process follow up with a Binax test to determine who that positive individual was. And then again, you're doing contact tracing. There's a lot of details here that still need to be figured out. It has quite a bit of promise. The parts that we're not sure about are obviously how many people can you put in there. The state is only covering the cost of this for 6 weeks. And then it turns over to the district if the district wants to continue doing it. We know the minimum cost is $5 per test. I don't know if that's $5 per test, if that's $5 per individual, or if that's $5 per petri dish that gets evaluated. If it's per petri dish, different story. If it's per student and employee, you're talking about $10,000 a week, somewhere in that vicinity. So, in talking with some of my peers across the state, there are some that have had this in their districts as pilots, and when they've been using it, some of them have used it, and some of them are planning on using it for the high need students who are in school every day. Some of them are mandating athletes be part of it, and then having it as an option for faculty and staff as well, or how some districts have considered using it. But again, there's another webinar this Friday. I still have to consult right now. We're in a kind of a waiting pattern to see what additional information comes out. There are some logistical questions about, do we have enough personnel in order to pull this off? And we don't have an answer to that because we don't really fully understand what it would take. So as the week goes on, we'll learn more. And again, there's another webinar I'll be a part of on Friday to get additional information. But again, it's something that's promising, very promising. Flu vaccines. Last week, the Mass Department of Public Health came out and said flu vaccines, they're going to continue to encourage them, but they are not required this year. There was a point in time back in October, September, somewhere around there where there was a deadline of the end of December, and then that got kicked to February, March. They came out last week and said there is no longer be a requirement because the flu has been very, very mild. I also wanted to make mention, Madam Chair, that we did receive a grant on the amount of $9,928.96 for our neighbors table. Mr. Conway, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Briefly, our neighbors table, we know is our food security partner in the region up here. They applied to the state, and it was Governor Baker's administration. So our neighbors table actually received $141,000. Our portion of that was slightly under $10,000, and it was basically for critical infrastructure for our kitchens. Schools are considered to be a really important distribution point for food insecure populations. So for things like equipment such as warmer trays and so forth, we can put towards that to upgrade our equipment. So we're very fortunate to be included in that.
So that was a pleasant surprise. And the last bit of information I have is, I think everyone's aware, the vaccine has started to roll out. We are working on plans for when we'll be able to administer it. Educators, pre-K through 12th, are in phase 2. That's slated sometime in February. And we are actively putting together plans so that each school might be a site for employees. It wouldn't be a school as a site right now for the community. If we can end up doing something like that, it makes sense. But the community is such a bigger scope of individuals. That one's going to have to be planned out by the towns. Before our school employees, that looks like something that might be coming in February. So as we get information, we'll keep you posted. And I'm at our next school committee meetings in February, right? So we'll see how far things progress. I mean, there's a lot of chatter. I was just at a town meeting, board of selectmen meeting, and You're talking about all the first responders, emergency personnel, health folks, all over at the boroughs, they were all getting vaccinated. So it's a step, and a very big step in the right direction. And that is all I have for updates.
Thank you very much. Those are great updates. Okay, new business. Greg, you want to update us on our budget?
Thank you.
You think?
As is tradition in the Pentucket Regional School District, at least recently, this is the second meeting of January, and the first look at the budget is handed out to you. I believe everybody has their budget books now, except for Christopher Markins and Wayne Adams. And I'm waiting to see if you want them delivered to your house or if you'll be able to stop by the school tomorrow and pick them up. They'll also be distributed to the towns tomorrow, 4 copies per town, 1 for the Finance Committee, 1 for the Board of Selectmen, 1 for the Finance Director or Town Manager in the town, and 1 that I leave there so they can distribute it with the general public and look at it at the library or wherever they like it. And it'll go to the principals as well. That being said, I've never in my life put together a budget that has so many unknowns. And the simple fact of the matter is we don't know anything. Normally by now we'd have an idea of at least salaries and things, but our largest union is not under contract for next year. We have to borrow $42 million, but it won't be borrowed until after town meetings, but it will have payments due in fiscal year 22. So that's also now is a educated guess, but it's still a guess. Revenue from the state. Normally, we'd be saying a week from Thursday, we'd be seeing the governor's budget. I seriously doubt it. We just got the one from last year a few weeks ago. I can't see how they'd possibly be ready to send out House 1. Without that, the DLS cannot provide the net minimum spending numbers for us to get even an attempted assessment of what it would cost each town. But we have to start somewhere, so this is where we start. I'll give you kind of some brief, we had to make some assumptions in this budget, what you see going forward. First one will be Chapter 70 revenue. In a normal year, I'd expect to get $30 per student additional, and we'd be getting an extra lot of money because we went to full day K for free this year. Problem is, we lost about 200 students this year. And I'm not sure if the state's going to look at our student population when we submit it as a hold harmless for the prior year, or just assume that they're going to pay us on that. If they discount us 200 kids times that thing, it's a lot of money.
Madam Chair, it's important for everyone to understand that I've been working with our legislators on that issue because it's not just an issue. It's an issue that's statewide. What's unique about Pentucket's situation is that this is the first year we were going to have full day kindergarten. So with those numbers not being accurate, it's hard. Like, we don't want to lose all that potential revenue. They're very aware of that, and I know Senator Tarr, Senator Zaglio, and Representative Meir have been very supportive of helping us take action to make sure that gets calculated in.
Yes, thank you for making all those phone calls. I seriously hope they work because in this budget, I'm assuming we're going to pick up about $320,000 in additional Chapter 78, mainly because of full day K. So it's very important that they hold us harmless for whatever happened this year statewide for everybody on the student population. A lot of kids were homeschooled. This budget assumes they're coming back. It's staffed like we're going to have that population back. It's for supplies, for staffing, for transportation, for all that stuff. We're assuming they're coming back. That's the first major assumption in this budget. The only other highly revenue specific assumption is on regional transportation. We lost about $60,000 from what the governor proposed to what we actually got when they finally got through to passing the fiscal year 21 budget. Obviously, they've been spending a lot of money and they've been not taking in as much. They were going to cut somewhere, and they held Chapter 70 harmless for this year, but transportation took a bit of a hit. I'm assuming next year, I'm going to level fund it for the same we got this year in actual. not what we got in the estimated budget.
And again, so that is one of the other topics that legislators are very familiar with. I know Senator Tarr in particular has been pushing that because it is very important, and it applies not just to Pentucket, but of course Triton as well as Whittier. So it's something that all three of our local schools, our school districts will be impacted by.
Another interesting thing you'll see as you go through the budget, for the very first time that since I've ever seen it tracked in Pentucket, and this is going back a lot of years, we actually have more choice out students than choice in. That started back in 2014 when the district decided that we weren't going to engage in the school choice system anymore by taking students in, except in very select cases. And we have weaned that population down to the point that after next year, it'll be, I think, 15 children total in the district. So basically, we've made it through the woods for that part of it. We don't count on that revenue anymore. It's been weaned into the system. And the out-of-district numbers, although more, are consistent. And that's already been factored into the budget. So we've gotten to the point now that school choice decision made 7 years ago no longer really has no effect on us budgetarily. So at least we got that one going for us. I want to also, I suppose I should commend a little bit the federal government and the state. I know where the feds get it, they just print it out. But the state gave us some money as well, and we've gotten quite a bit, and we're hoping to get a little bit more. That will help us tremendously to get through the rest of this year. I know the assistant superintendent has been given some updates on a second CARES Act. We haven't seen it yet, but it's very encouraging, and it'll certainly make sure we get through the rest of this year unscathed. So that's a good news that we're not going to have to worry about backfilling things to get through this year. I know the finance subcommittee wanted me to just touch on a couple other areas, mainly because I know it's going to be a short time frame as we go through this. Their thought process was going forward, obviously it'll be a committee decision, is to do a public hearing on March 2nd, and then the final vote to accept on March 16th. Normally we would do the meeting before each one of these, but the regional agreement says March 15th. I think the towns will be okay with us doing it on March 16th. I think every 2 weeks we get that make decisions as we go forward on this is going to be helpful to us. Like I said, I don't see a lot of information forthcoming quickly that we would normally be having. So I think a little bit of a delay in our planning would probably be helpful. You wanted me to touch on the revenue assumptions, which I just basically did. The Chapter 70 transportation, I'm going to assume not much changing in any other area. Obviously, the debt will go up for each 3 towns, but that is debt excluded money. That's money they can raise in their tax recap. It will have no effect on their own services they provide. Where we do get into it is their operating assessment, and this budget assumes I'll be asking them for, as a group, 3% per town. Obviously, it may not work out that way. We already the last year, one town basically it went up $1,000, I believe. So that's what we need the state budget to finally come out with, so they can create net minimum spending. We can see where we're at. They also wanted me to give a quick review of how this budget's going to play with special education. Special education is interesting, and I go into it in a little bit of detail in the narrative, which I know nobody reads anyway, so I would read it.
I do.
But the issue this year isn't that we're not spending a lot of money on special ed, because we're not actually for most years. It's because the children that would be leaving the district and going to our normal out-of-district placement can't find slots because of COVID. Now, I'm assuming next year they're going to go, but they were already factored into this year's budget as well. So it would make no sense to assume that they were already in there and then assume more people were going, because I think they'll just be going for the first time. So what I have done is just take what we've spent this year because it factored in those children leaving, even though they didn't leave, and add a normal 3% bump, which is what the state usually gives the schools for an allowance to increase their rates. So the first time in quite a while, we're not going to be looking at massive increases in the special ed line. We do have some money in circuit breaker, should my assumptions fall flat, that we can draw down on and not affect the rest of the educational system. So I'm comfortable with doing it this way. I'll listen to your opinions, obviously, as we get to that area and we start talking in public. I already went through a lot of the assumptions. The assumptions are hard. We don't know about how the debt's going to play out. We don't know how the teacher's contract's going to play out. We don't know how the state's revenue is going to play out. And we don't know how many children are coming back. So I guess we'll just work at those things as we go forward and move on. So that's a quick overview of it. You can all start to review it. As always, anytime you have questions for me. Tomorrow, as I said, the rest of the books will be distributed, and the website will have the templates placed upon it as they are every year for parents and other people to review.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. Chris, you had a question?
Not really a question, a comment, and then a couple of clarifications. So I really want to thank Greg for his work on the budget this year, because if anybody who is in finance knows, this year is probably the hardest year to do, and yet I believe that all of his assumptions that he made and the work that he's done, actually through the years, to kind of set us up to not have any issues or shortfalls. You know, I really want to commend him, that I feel very comfortable that going into this budget season, we're going to end up at a place where we need to be. So I wanted to thank Greg first and foremost, and anybody else who was collaborating in that. The other thing that Greg didn't mention that I think we talked about when the finance committee had their meeting is that when people are looking at the individual line items and the expenses, like for staffing, he made some changes this year that may look like, oh, this person's not here, this person's new, or we added a person. I don't think we should look at that. I think we should look at in the back of the book where there's the teachers and the staffing and how many high school teachers there are and in which department. Look at those numbers and not the individual line items. Greg, I don't know if you want to just give a little bit more on that.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. I was having a tough time reading that one little note. I couldn't remember what it was. You got it. Yeah. Staffing in this budget, as we mentioned before, because of the teacher's contract, is strange. Normally, we could be able to, even without a teacher's contract, have some sort of projection, and we've done the best we can putting it in there. But I will tell you that even though we are at a shortfall after the original run, about 629,000, if you do go to your budget book and you go into section 3, you will see the proposed staffing that is in this book. And again, you're going to see some very strange things because, like I said, we're missing a whole bunch of kids. So even though it looks like we didn't put all these things in, they are in there. So I encourage you to look at the back, the fiscal year for the cost center year-over-year staffing. Yes, fiscal year 22 is less than fiscal year 21 by 5 positions, but those were things that were happening normally through this year anyways. So for the most part, there is nobody that's currently working here who's not in this book somewhere. Their staffing is all there, staff positions are there, and the best guess of their salary is there. So when you go through the book, you may see some line items you're used to seeing, like a science grouping goes up 2.5%. That's what you'd expect to see under the normal things. A lot of them you're going to see 0. Some of them you're going to see 18%. It's because of the way the one-year contract we had this year was working. So it's probably not going to be as exact as we're used to seeing it, but it's close enough that we can work with it. So, like I said, don't just look at the chart and see negative 16% and think we laid off a bunch of teachers. We didn't. So,
and I think it's important, just for the most part, people really, for school committee members, just to understand that there's nothing in this budget like, hey, we need to cut a massive amount or we need to add a massive amount. Neither of those things exist in this budget. It's not a time in our history that any of those things can be done, because as Greg started out with, there's so much incredible uncertainty about what is going to happen economically with the federal government, with our state government, and our local governments. It's just not a time to make any big changes one way or the other. We really need to just, for the most part, stay the course where we are now, make some minor adjustments here or there, and move forward until we have a clear picture of what our finances will look like.
I do want to make note that that's a good reminder right there, that there is 2 new initiatives in this.
Yes.
Not anything outstanding. One is to continue on with the curriculum development portion moving forward. I believe it's English and science next year.
Literacy and into finishing out some social studies. Yeah.
So we'll be moving forward with that. So there was an increase in that line.
Those are already in progress, and this is to finish.
Right, so we're continuing on that. And there's some additional staffing movement in the area of technology to continue on with having a person at each elementary town to work with students as they become more integrated with all the Chromebooks and things, and a curriculum technology implementation type person that the superintendent could explain a lot more about than I could.
So first, the positions that Greg's talking about, we have these are in the budget for this year, but they were not in the budget previously. Obviously, once we had this huge shift in technology, we only have this will boggle the minds of many people who are watching. We only have 2 technology employees this year, just 2. We have our director of technology, and we have a support person in technology. Support person goes around, helps troubleshoot, fix keyboard screens, things like that. And Mr. Buck, who's our director of technology, he bears the brunt of everything else. We have built into our system teachers who take on positions as tech coordinators. But of course, if you're a tech coordinator during the day, you're teaching. So it's not practical for you to go and help provide support. So once we had all these, everyone was essentially one-to-one. They either have their own device or they receive devices from us. And teachers have been required essentially to do types of technology they've never done before. We went ahead and made this decision to basically hire tech aides. They're not extremely high-paying positions. They make about
between 28 and 30.
Yeah, about $28,000 to $30,000 is the salary, but one for each elementary school, just so that they can provide the support. If you talk to teachers, the biggest thing they want is support in the areas of technology, special education, and curriculum. And we'd love to be able to provide all of those, right? So this was an effort to help us provide that immediate need that exists and support. And in terms of our technology, we have, like we said, we have a tech director, but we're looking for someone who's a technology integration specialist and knows something about networks. And by tech integration specialist, it's great that you have the technology. Do you know how to apply it? Do you know what's out there and how it can be used in the classroom? We don't have anything, nothing like that has existed here at Pentucket, aside from being teachers who are very good at what they do. And then, like we had today, professional development on technology. We have teachers who are excellent. We have parents speak earlier about how the teachers online just doing amazing things. Yeah, that's great for some people. They've gone and they've self-taught themselves and done this. That shouldn't be something they have to do. That should be a service that we're providing to our teachers. So the era we're in technology and education, we have got to have someone in our system that is able to show other people, look, this is how you use this. And it's not something that needs to be done in 45 minutes after the last bell rings on a Tuesday because it's a faculty meeting. It should be something that's done throughout the day across the board. So that is those are the changes. But again, neither of those are very large expenses.
Are there any more questions about the budget or?
Great job, Greg. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next on the agenda is a communications discussion.
I can start with this. So the communications subcommittee has met the past 2 Fridays. And the first one, we kind of set out some goals. And the second one, we kind of had an onslaught of parent emails that came out. So we kind of relooked at that. So there's 3 areas that we are trying to kind of look at. And one is the website. So I'll take that one. The second one is like the communication, the back and forth with whomever is on the outside. Marie can kind of fill you in on that. And then Joanna came up with some language that we might bring forward at a future meeting, so she can talk about that. So the first part is the website, and in an effort to make it easier for people to find information on the school committee part of the website, I met with Dennis Buck today and kind of went through. There's a really good website for the Duxbury School Committee that is much more able to be navigated easily than ours was. And Dennis gave me a little background on when we switched over to this new website 6 years ago or something like that. Everything kind of got moved over for the school committee as it was. So nobody ever sat down with him and said, well, this is how we would like it to do. So the transition didn't look pretty. It wasn't easy to navigate. All of the other tabs, if you go to the prsd.org, all of the other tabs like have had time spent in making it more easily accessible and understand, and it makes sense. So what our subcommittee proposed to do, and he's going to try to set this up and have it as a test, and we can look at it and have before it goes live, that essentially at the top of school committee, you'd have a drop-down menu that would have meetings, and then it would have contacts, and then it would have our policies, and then it would have the budget. And then I think it kind of has another like additional information, which everything else gets lumped into. So I think this is going to be easier to navigate for people who are looking for this information. And I'm hoping that in the end, it'll be a pretty quick process and it will look great and everybody will be happy with it. Marie, do you want to talk about your discussion with Dorothy?
Sure. So I talked to our MASC regional representative, Dorothy, because as we all know, we have gotten a few emails. And I think we were all in a situation where we didn't know exactly how to respond, because in our school committee training, we're told never to speak out as an individual, that we're always a unit of 9, and that there should be one voice for the 9 of us. But at the same time, I think a lot of us were torn because we want the community, we're supposed to engage with the community, and we want to engage with the community, and we need to find a way to be able to respond in a way that says, we are receiving your emails or your phone calls, and we are listening and we are hearing you. But then there's the danger zone of how do you respond without speaking on behalf of all your committee members. So I spoke to Dorothy, and I asked her a few key questions. I asked her if she would suggest getting rid of our school committee email. You know, there's a tab that the public can click on our website, and it gives, the email goes to all 9 of us in favor of individual emails. And she thought it would be best to keep the general email and have it distributed to all of us when mass emails are being sent, because she said that way we know that we're all getting the same messages from people, we're all getting the same emotions and the same feel from our community. She also said if we were to do the individual emails, it might create a situation where, say, a member of West Newbury had just emailed in West Newbury reps, but it was something that was a district concern, then that's leaving 6 of our members in the dark. So she thought the best thing to do was to have that group emailed still. And also, she said that in our responses, we have to be united and have a united front. And the best thing to do is to have your chairperson send out a message to the community. And that in a case like we just had, where there's a lot of emails and again, the mixed messages, you just want to have one solid voice speaking on behalf of the committee. And what else did we talk about? We also discussed maybe having an automatic reply, just so people know when they email us, rather than get nothing in response. Something to the effect of, we value your input and we appreciate your time, and we are reading these so that people do know we do read our emails, even if we're not responding individually. And she said she didn't have a problem with it. But the only concern she would have there is, again, if someone had emailed us about one individual concern, you wouldn't want to get just a blank statement back on that. so to keep an eye on things. And she said there's no policy regarding this. It's really just troubleshooting. And the best thing she said the best thing you can do is be a unified voice. Have your chairperson speak in that role as chair on behalf of the entire committee. And she said, and the best thing to do is once a vote has been made, she said, whatever way that vote goes, wherever you feel you are on that vote, you support the way the decision went. And that means just saying, we've had a vote, my vote's been recorded and we're moving on, if that's all you feel you need to say. So it was a good conversation to learn, recap what we learned in training and the importance of being a unified team, I think.
Thanks, Maureen. Lisa?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I know I had voiced concern. We had received a lot of emails from people, parents and staff, on both sides of the remote hybrid, from different towns, what have you. I was concerned because quite a few of the emails that I received went into my spam. So I wasn't sure if other members had checked their spam for those emails. Some people misspelled my email address incorrectly. So somehow it was discovered by somebody because, I wouldn't have known it was spelled incorrectly because it wouldn't have reached me. But then I could see further down on the thread that they had resent it to me or somebody had forwarded it to me. My concern is that, we each have individualized email addresses on the website, which on one hand is good, but on the other hand, not everybody in the committee might be getting the same emails. And I think it's incredibly important when we make decisions and go in to vote that we're all going in there with the same information. And when the school district email address is used for the group as a whole, I know at one point those emails were just getting sent to Marianne, and Marianne would forward them to us. And I don't know if that's been fixed or not, but my other concern that was raised is that it was my understanding that some of my fellow school committee members responded to individuals' emails without looping in the school committee as a whole. And we all speak as a group, not individually. So I, in turn, have no idea what responses were from my fellow members, who responded and who didn't. But that's when I brought it to Dina's attention, that I thought it needed to be addressed. Because in all the years that I've been on school committee, I know I'm not supposed to respond to people, and I don't. And sometimes I get a lashing for that. But it's what we were taught in charter the course of mask, that we're not supposed to speak as ourselves, and we speak as a committee as a whole. Thank you.
Emily, and then Chris Redding.
So I really appreciate you guys bringing this up. My question, some of what you've said tonight definitely clarifies some of my questions. But I appreciate that we should definitely all speak as one. But when someone sends emails to us, either at our specific PRSD email or even to our personal emails, even in this capacity, and yet they're speaking to us as a school committee member, and asking us hey, I want to talk to you about this. Could you explain to me this? And again, I feel like an unpleasant person to ignore it, but I also am not going to put some auto reply on my personal email because I don't feel like that's appropriate either. So I guess that's the question I have when it's something that is specific, and this has happened to me a lot in the past couple of weeks. And the things that are not asking questions and are just derogatory and unpleasant, I just put off to the side. But when someone's directly asking me as a representative of our town to answer these questions, I feel like that also puts us in a really weird position.
Yeah. So Emily, what I'm hearing your question is, if someone's asking you a specific question, do you think you might be able to answer? Are you supposed to answer it? Or are you supposed to wait and hold off?
Well, and it's, I mean, yes, but not like a general school committee question. Like, can you, I mean, I could call them up, but it about like, and I mean, most of these lately, obviously, were about our last vote. More around why was that your thinking or that kind of thing. And so it wasn't just about the whole. And again, we all say what we think in our meetings, so I feel like but when they're sending that as a school committee member, like, am I beholden to that to respond, or do I let it fall under the auspices of the umbrella of chair's response? And if so, how do we get that to the public when it's not getting sent to our PRSD email?
Okay, Joanna?
Yeah, so I want to just respond to this because this is actually the language that we're hoping to put on the website, right where you send emails to the school committee. Basically, what it will say is, if you send an email to 2 or more committee members, then you shouldn't be expecting a response. Just know that your email will be read and it could possibly be discussed at the next meeting. But if you want to actually engage in a conversation with somebody, please send an email to set up a meeting with that individual committee member, because that's no different than us walking around town and somebody coming up to you and wanting to talk to you. So if people want to reach out to a committee member, then they need to send an individual email to that committee meeting member requesting some type of a meeting. And then we're also going to put language, we were also considering putting language there that would say to people, just know that once you send an email to a school committee, it's part of the public record. And if somebody requests through a public records request to see the email, that it will be released, just because I don't think people are necessarily aware of that. So we have language already written up. We'll share it with you at the next meeting, but it basically just addresses those 3 things, which I think Emily is what you're asking about.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because some of them were like that, and then some of them I saw went to me personally, like individually, but then later things got forwarded, and I think that was via the spam problem, that clearly that person had sent that same email to every person on the committee individually, which I feel like kind of blurs that line. So thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Chris, ready?
So there's 2 things that I want to add. The first thing, actually, when I was sitting with Dennis today, he kind of clarified what happened with that spam. That as one of the public comment people said, there probably was a template used by some of the teachers, and there was something in that template that Google picked up as something that they should put into our spam folder. He does not have control over what goes in the spam folder. Google is its own decision maker with regard to what gets into spam and what doesn't. So I don't think there was ever anything nefarious going on for anybody who feels that it went into our spam folder. That's what my husband does for a job, is he does anti-spam software, and there just are so many different rules that are set up by all the different companies that it's really hard to keep good emails from going in there, especially I think because that was set up as a template. There was probably just one thing that kicked it into that folder. The second thing is we had discussed with, as a subcommittee, having Dorothy come out for all of us to do a presentation and kind of a learning opportunity for all of us. I think based upon our conversations tonight, I think that there's some decisions that we need to make as a committee. Do we have individual emails on there? Do we not have individual emails on there? How do we respond? Do we want to have the automatic reply? I think there's a lot that we as a committee should discuss doing. I personally would like to see this set up as not as a school committee business meeting date, but some other time that we can get together. If you want to be part of it, if you don't, that's fine. To kind of talk about all these issues. It seems like every 5 years or so we have a big something that blows up that we are kind of in this conundrum. So maybe this is a time that we need to look at ourselves and kind of make some of these decisions. So I don't know, Marie, if you asked Dorothy that or you haven't gotten a chance to.
Yes, we had the subcommittee meeting on Friday and I called her and she had a meeting. So I'm just waiting for a call back. I can try her again tomorrow if I don't hear from her by then. But I mean, with the long weekend and haven't had the meeting on Friday, I just didn't have an opportunity to talk to her yet.
Yeah.
But I can call in so I can get some answers. I think one of the questions we asked is, do we post our personal emails or phone numbers if that's what a committee member so chooses, right? That was a consideration. Just other communication questions that we had come up with for her.
Right. So I think that would be a good use of our time to kind of go through that as an exercise. It's also part of our school committee goals is to have some of this training. So this might actually check off a box in our goals section too, to kind of train ourselves on this area.
All right, Dr. V.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, I'm all about any professional development opportunities we can have. If Dorothy Tracy can come and answer questions, because obviously her having just such a wide breadth of experiences with different districts, she probably be able to help us. Mr. Markins probably has some expertise in that area as well. But one of the things I wanted to make mention of, we've received, I think, 4 public requests. And so all of you have experienced this where we're going and asking you for emails. So just so you understand what this means you're sending us emails that you may have gotten individually. We are then compiling those. I have to go through and read every single one of those, redact anything that's private, personal, using the legal exemptions. And then we have to compile and try to put them in some sensible order. There's some cover letter and things like that. So I think last week it probably dominated about 10 to 20 hours of combined time between Marianne and myself. It's the ones we got today, that's going to be an enormous amount of time. And we have to provide it, right? We're not going to be able to provide it within 10 days.
No, we don't have to provide it within 10 days.
And the ones that came today, there's going to be an expense because it's so broad. And these requests, it's fine. It's fine that they come in. We've always gotten them, right? This is a legal right, but we don't have people in place to do these. So it is Marianne and I that are going through you with your help. Like you're sending stuff in, she's taking it, organizing it, and I'm going through and looking for anything that needs to be redacted. But these take us away from our ability to do our job. So one of the things I'm just asking us to maybe think about for the future, and maybe something the chair and I talk about, is just adding onto the agenda a correspondence. So anything that does come to the school committee, we just we put all those messages together. We scan them up, they get loaded up as part of the packet as correspondence, so everyone has an opportunity to read it. And that way, it's an agenda item, there's correspondence, and people know it's posted, people can see what everyone else has written, it's there. And if there is a public records request, they can just go up onto the website and look at all the public records that are there, as opposed to keeping them in our mailboxes. I think for the public, that's a big shift, because in doing that, your name's attached to what's written. Your name's attached to what's written right now. Every time you send it to anyone, a school committee or a teacher, if there's a public records request, your name is attached to it. So,
as well as anything you tell us or your children.
Yeah, so that's the stuff, right? And that stuff's about you and your kids. So that's the stuff that I have to go through, read, and redact. So when we have I think the request today was for the entire school year. The
entire school year, yeah.
So this entire school year, that's a lot of information. I'm going to spend a lot of reading time. But again, I just think it might be if we add in, and Ms. Naffi, I think you had said at one point that correspondence had been on a school committee agenda. And Chris, you may know how this happened in the past. But that would seem to me to be a way to clean this up, to make sure everybody's reading the same items, and to avoid this public records request work. And I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm happy to do work for the district. Very happy to do it, take care of our community. But this is taking Marianne and I away from other things that we need to be doing.
Yeah, I do remember having this in the past, and I'm trying to remember if it was with Dr. Mulqueen or even before him, that it became an issue, and I don't know how it kind of rolled off being on the agenda packet.
Yeah, and that might be another question we can ask Dorothy and find out what okay, that's something we could.
Yeah, we can work on that. Okay, thank you, Communications Subcommittee. Okay, bylaws. I sent out a draft document that Joanna and I worked on. And we made sure that you could see everything that we were deleting and then what we've added. And then we wanted to discuss, we'll go over this next week once everyone looks through it, has any questions. But I know Joanna was thinking we wanted to add a time.
Yeah, so there was two things that I had asked Dina if she would be amenable to adding, and then we'd ask you about it next week. The first is setting a time limit for the meetings. So if a meeting begins at 6, it's set to adjourn at, say, 8 o'clock. And when you set that, so most meetings that I attend that are by Robert's rules at my work, this is how the meetings are run, where there's a beginning time and there's an ending time, so that then people can plan their time accordingly. Now, if something happens at that meeting that has to be dealt with, you can always make a motion to extend the meeting. And I think typically motions to extend have to be approved by a 2/3 vote. But I think that would be a good way to just make us a little more time conscious sometimes. So that's one thing that when we talk next week, we can discuss if people would like that. And then the second thing is to add in here some kind of a bylaw review process, because right now the bylaws kind of got away from us because there's nothing in the bylaws that says when we're going to review the bylaws. So we have to make a decision if we think the bylaws should be reviewed every 1 year, every 2, every 3, etc. So that's another thing we'd like to discuss next week or at our next meeting. So I just wanted to put that out there so you had a little bit of time to think about it before the next meeting. Did I remember everything, Dina?
I think so, yeah. That was
Okay.
pretty much it. Does anyone have any, want to discuss something now or thoughts on the additions we're thinking of?
So the next meeting is February 2, not next week.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, Dr. B, strategic plan update.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So one of the things that's really important is our roadmap, the work we're doing, where we're going. So what you have in your packet, and if you have digitally as well, it's just a report card that I put together, and let me explain to you how this was created. First, when you look at this, it goes over each objective, right? So there were 4 total objectives, and then under each objective, there you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. If you click on any one of those are the priorities under that objective. If you click on any one of those, you can see the action items that we identified needed to be done. Now, this goes back to the strategic plan that was approved. I want to say it was the 2019. I think it was spring of 2019. It might have been the summer of 2019. So it was important. I think it's always important to go and check, see where are you in this, because this is your roadmap. So the process on this was for us as a district to have each person look over each of these along with the action items and to give feedback on specifically where things are. So the comments that are under each one give you an overview of what we have done under each goal. And I'll just tell you, there's quite a bit because of COVID. There's quite a few items that we actually could say that we've completed, and I would never have dreamt that we would have completed them. But we've completed, but they're still going to be in progress. So I'm happy to go over these. So when I'll go over my just broad strokes here. So school culture and communication, we know like one of the big things that we were able to do was bring in a new system, a SIMS information system, student information management system. And that was in the form of Infinite Campus. Before when we were doing the strategic plan, we knew that we were going to move in that direction, but we didn't know we were going to be able to get the training done. But we have. I see Casey's here in our meeting. Casey, do you have Infinite Campus on your phone?
Yes.
Yeah, so Casey can check her grades. She knows how to. So students now are in a culture where they can see their assignments, they can see their grades. Parents, the same thing. So that was a big step forward for us in terms of that type of information. So we did those trainings. We know the K6 standard report cards were in place. So those were two things that have happened. The table of organization, the virtual ombudsman, yeah, those are there. A table of organization, just as you know, gives us an overview of how the system, the infrastructure of a system is set up and designed. It also can be used to identify these are areas where we need to provide more support based on what's happening in the district. The virtual ombudsman, I absolutely love the idea. And here's an example of something we've done that could be incredibly useful. One really big problem with it. Any takers on this one?
Updating it.
Yeah. Who's overseeing it? So it's the same thing we've experienced. Chris said this earlier when Dennis. So when I say that we only have 2 people in our technology department, and then we actually have the two aides, one in Merrimack and one in Bagnell now. But when we only have 2 people in our, there's no one to oversee and make those updates. So we don't have a person dedicated to them. And it's not because people aren't working, it's because our infrastructure is relatively thin compared to a lot of other districts. So I think it's a great tool, but that's something that needs to be worked on, needs to be figured out by us. In terms of surveys, we survey almost on every single thing, but the biggest survey that we do to get responses are the perception surveys that we do with student, staff, and parent perception surveys. That gives not just the district, it gives each school a direction about where they want to go with their school improvement plans. It gives us as a district, these are the professional development opportunities we need to provide, and here's where we need to make adjustments, and here's where we're doing really well. So again, if you look at the accomplishments, we had pre-COVID, we had students and people coming into our meetings, we were giving them the pins. And of course, we're not able to do, we haven't done anything virtually, so I've been failing at that part of it. The schools, however, have been doing very well in terms of they still are keeping up and posting up on Twitter and on social media their Teachers of the Week. On the s'mores, particularly at the elementary, on the s'mores that they do, the weekly s'mores, they do a little write-up on them. And curriculum and data, again, all of these, you can read through this, everything's in progress here. And I would have loved to have said, yeah, we've got some of those completed. We've made great strides in that. But when you look at something like 2-3, assessment data being utilized to determine what's most important curriculum in terms of curriculum development, yes, we have made huge strides with curriculum development. But, we don't have any MCAS data. We have it from, we didn't have MCAS last year. So we have it from the previous year. And even right now, the debate is raging on about, yes, the state wants to have MCAS data, but is that the data we should be using? And how are you going to quantify it? Like, what's that going to look like? Are you measuring against where we were at? Or are you measuring against everybody in the state where they are now? Is that MCAS even what you want to use? You just want to use some type of a diagnostic, which would probably make more sense. But you can't use a diagnostic unless everybody in the state has the same diagnostic. So there's just a lot of things there that need to be figured out, and it's not necessarily something that's under our control. When we talk about students and staff having the ability to have time to work together, our design right now, so I'm on 2.4, our design right now is purposely set up so that those Mondays can be times where teachers are planning, but they have time to work on their grade levels. One of the biggest things I wanted to see out of our elementaries, in particular in middle high school by subject area, was for them to have time to be able to come together and talk about their subject area, talk about their grade level, talk about their data that they have. That just hadn't been happening. And now it's happening. It's not, I don't know if it's happening. It happens far more in detail in some areas than it does in others. But it's such a big growth piece that we don't really recognize or talk about that didn't exist previously, or at least anything but superficial. So that's been great. The student opportunities, this has been a struggle throughout since March. This has been a challenge, giving students additional time to provide support. Yeah, we know that's at the middle school and high school, and in the elementary schools, that was that time that students had during the day, where you might have some students who need additional support were getting pulled out. Other students were in the classroom that stayed there and continued to work. Some teachers were able to capitalize on that time. Other teachers were put in a position where they couldn't do much. So that's something that we still needs to be figured out. And then for elementary before and after school, there's no buses. So if there's no buses for transportation, who gets to stay after and who doesn't? And even contractually, can be an issue at times. So when we go to protocols and procedures, again, the chain of command, we have a table of organization, virtual ombudsman, but that stuff, that has to be more clearly defined. The student code of conduct, and not only do we know the student code of conduct was overhauled to be said the same across the board. Right now, administrators, and I think anyone, including all of you, I've heard say this as well, like, we need to have just one uniform, this is the Pentucket Regional School District student handbook. And if there's something different at Bagnell compared to middle school, then let those differences be on a separate document. But this is the code of conduct, this is the protocols and procedures, and this is the family handbook for the entire district. And doing that, I think, will make things much more clear for families. The employee effective and efficient business and management system, we've gone through this. I know Greg will tell you that the software he uses for his is something he has to have. Like it's what he's familiar with, what he's good at. So he's not going to make an adjustment there. We know we made the adjustment over to the campus, but it's one of the areas where Brent and I were talking about this. We've made big strides in using fillable PDFs in terms of hiring, our process of hiring personnel, that it's digitized, not to the point where I'd love it to be, but it's just such a big step forward because you're having to teach people how to use a document, a virtual document, not just how to fill it out, but then how to assign it to the next person, we've made progress in those areas. And of course, the safety protocols, well, I put complete here. I hesitate to put complete, right? Because we're making new protocols all the time with COVID, depending on what's going on. So I put complete because yes, absolutely. We did a full review. We still have the emergency operations manual that we follow. In addition to that, we have all the protocols that we put into place, depending on what your situation is for COVID. And when we had, what the heck was it?
Yes.
Thank you. There was a gas leak. Oh, we have a specific plan for a gas leak. Very specific. This is the protocol you follow. So our emergency stuff, it's all there, except for the things we couldn't predict. COVID was not in there. A pandemic was not in there. But we developed that, right? We collectively, all of you included, we've worked to collectively put that together with the boards of health. So I put complete there, but I hate putting complete on anything because most of this is. And then Mr. Danforth did a great job helping me fill out this, providing the comments. In terms of addressing infrastructure, they still use school dude. So one of the things I know we need to get better at, our facilities takes, if it's on school dude, it's on a list, they fill it out. But then they also, because we're small, right? They get text messages, emails, things that aren't necessarily to be queue on school dude. So they can't always figure out what they've done and what they haven't. They just know they get a call, they go and they address it. So we need to work that piece out. But they are constantly, I know I asked them to speak at least weekly or bi-weekly with principals. They're on, when the principals need something, they pick up the phone and Bob Danforth gets back to them in 24, 48 hours max. And everything's triage, right? Whatever the greatest need is what they go and address. And one of the big things that happened out of COVID, I'm trying to think which one this falls under. I don't know if I wrote this, I might not have written in here. Well, I'll just tell you though, but we had about a 12-year backup on things that need to get fixed from facility-wise. So when students and staff were not in the building, our custodial staff and facilities was still showing up doing their work. So they made huge progress on updating problems that were chronic problems that weren't significant, they weren't serious, but they've been on a list for so long. So that time was incredibly helpful. Just in terms of 4-2. So before the pandemic, so just a reminder to people, yes, we're dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with a lot of different issues. And in the meantime, there's a building being built over there that we are responsible for and we have to oversee. So even before the pandemic, I was in meetings at least 2-3 times a week just having to do with the building, and that still happens. We've done them, shifted over to virtual, but we have to keep track of every dime that gets spent. It's our responsibility fiscally to the towns to make sure we're doing that. Thus far, I think we've done a really good job. And anytime there's a question, Greg and I just talk about it, and then we take it to our OPM on. But the neatest thing that we've been able to do is figure out how to optimize student learning opportunities in that new structure. And the pandemic has given us a little bit of advantage in that anything that once it hit anybody who was thinking about doing a project, there was a lot of question marks. Do I want to do it or not? So because there's not a lot of future projects that are available, the building kind of came to a little bit of a standstill. We've had highly competitive bids come in, and that's given us the opportunity to add things into this project. So we had the project where it was with all our dreams and wishes, and we've been able to add to it. So that's awesome. It's just from an infrastructure and space standpoint, we're not down to the point of purchasing FF&E, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So we're not talking about tables and stuff like that. There's a budget for that, but just in terms of the structure itself. So that's been just a tremendous part. And the amount of input the facilities department has on this, especially on the infrastructure of the building, is extraordinary. Extraordinary. I would probably say Greg had, when we were doing this, probably about 65-70% of the conversation was with Greg had. Because we need to make sure that we thought through every energy efficiency, mechanically what would work best, what was going to have the greatest longevity, what would be the easiest to provide maintenance. Those are the pieces. We don't want to just say yes to something. We investigate it. We investigate in detail, make sure it's the best for this community, and we're getting bang for our buck. And we're not going to cheap out on something just because it's the lowest price. We're going to get the quality item that will last a long time, that will have the longevity, and instead of buying something cheap that we have to replace, I'll move on. And then the 4-3 on that, every year. So we have a list. We update it, the capital project list. We have to submit that to the towns. We do that, I believe it's by the end of March. Okay, is that right?
It's in the budget book.
Yes.
That's
Section
in
5 of the budget book.
Yeah, so we do. But again, our unique relationships with our towns, even if that wasn't there, our facilities folks and any one of us could just call someone from one of the towns and we have a conversation about the building, what's going on. We submit that to the towns just so it's a heads up of these are the issues that your buildings are facing. Right now, the middle school and the high school, they're going to be torn down. So in a couple of years, they're going to be gone. And we'll have a new building. And those are the two buildings that we as collectively, as all three towns, as Pentucket own. The individual towns own their individual schools. So when there's an issue and it's going to exceed $10,000, that's something the town has to address. And I think, again, that relationship helps both ways. Like, they know they can rely on us to fix everything we possibly can for under that $10,000 threshold. They also trust our judgment because we don't just make those decisions on ourselves. We make them collaboratively with the folks in town so they can see the problem. Again, it's just been a really good relationship. But I thought a midterm progress report was good. It keeps everybody on their toes. It shows where we're going. And I'll be honest, I look at this and say, okay, well, there's some other things in here that I think we need to add in. And there'll probably be things that appear in school improvement plans next year. When we start talking things about equity and equality, those are issues that should be in here. And they're not right now, but in that strategic plan, absolutely, they will appear.
Thank you, Dr. B.
Sure.
I know you put a lot of work into this, and I really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions? Chris Redding.
It's kind of it kind of has to do with this, but it also has to go back to something that Casey actually mentioned with regard to like giving the students the support that they need, considering that it's like completely different than it was a year ago. And we've kind of morphed into this hybrid, one day on in school in person and then the next day. I'm wondering if any consideration has been given. So Casey brought up in her student rep piece, that now that there's more live streaming expectations, I think the teachers originally had prepared to have, when they were not in school, it would keep them pretty busy through that whole day. But now that you're eating into their work time with live streaming time that they have to be there, like I am concerned that perhaps we're now starting to ask too much of certainly our upper, secondary students. I don't know necessarily about the elementary because I don't have elementary kids. So I don't know if that's something that, I think if there's kids who are feeling overwhelmed with having to be in the live streams and also having to handle the amount of work that they have, has anybody thought about this, worked on it, reached out to the kids, talked to the teachers about really looking at it? Question, comment?
Sure, I think Brent will want to talk about this as well. I'll just say, one of the important things on this shift, which starts tomorrow, right? So there's a requirement that we need to have 35 hours on average, grades 1, 4, 7, and 10. And in that, it's not a statement that it has to be it doesn't necessarily have to be a progressive work. And by that I mean, what you do on day A continues on day B, C. So you go through, you do addition on Monday, subtraction on Tuesday, division on Wednesday, and multiplication on Thursday. It could just be a redundancy, but it's just availability. The students have to have the opportunity. And this is part of the conversation that was had with the problem-solving teams in terms of, are we supposed to take attendance for the kids who are not with us, that when we're live streaming, should we be taking attendance? And the answer is no. The state requirement was never to have students in class every single day. The state just wants the students to have access and the opportunity to have it. Brent, do you want to talk about how teachers are working that at the?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially at the middle school and high school, you'll see sort of a noticeable shift where all the classes are streaming. And I think to Casey's point, I think it's valid in that the teachers had prepared asynchronous work for kids on those days and are probably continuing to prepare that, likely not really considering the fact that the kids are basically going to be tuning in online the whole time. So I think it's a point of discussion. We purposely did not decide to require attendance, particularly at the secondary level, for those live streaming sessions. And it was a lot of discussion internally amongst some teacher leaders, administratively, and it really centered on the fact of that we gave families and students this expectation of what school would look like. They created their home schedules, they created all of that, and then to change that on them and then require it, we felt like was not necessarily fair. I don't know that all teachers agree with us either. I think some teachers feel as though attendance should be mandated for all of these. I think our dilemma came of, okay, so if we require attendance and they don't come, then what? Are we going to flunk 20% of the students because they don't show up on the 3 days a week or the 2 days a week for live stream? And that was sort of the struggle. And we've seen that in other communities who had been live streaming, and they have failure rates of 20, 30, 40%. And it's not because kids don't know the content, it's because they're just not showing up to the live sessions, therefore they're flunking. So I think maybe some discussion with our department chairs and administratively about how do you find the balance of the kids who are participating in that instruction. Is there less asynchronous work they should be doing versus the kids who are not participating? They have to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the day, school is not about, it shouldn't be about doing stuff, right? School is about learning and demonstrating to your teachers what you've learned. It's about demonstrating your competency with the content and the expectations the students have put forward. It should not be about, there were 10 assignments and you completed 9 of them satisfactorily, so that's it. It shouldn't be that way. It should be about what you expect students to know and be able to do, and have they demonstrated that to you.
Marie, and then Chris Redding.
So I just want to go to the objective on school culture and communication real quick. So when Sims and Infinite Campus first came out, I think it's fantastic for secondary students. But I still, and I think I said this at the time, there's still a big gap with the elementary students and parents' communication and how to figure out how your students do, especially this year, there's no, I'm not going through a Friday folder. Our parents not seeing paperwork come home. We've talked about this. There's Google Classroom. Yeah, you can log on to your kids' Google Classroom. But just even before COVID, I just would like to see more communication between elementary and the parents, because I think there's a big gap there that, I could tell you every single grade my kid gets in the secondary level, but you have no idea.
So when you talk about communications, the classroom to home, in terms of how is my student progressing?
Right. And I've heard from multiple parents as well, as far as the standard-based grading goes. I've gotten questions like, how does this work? Because some of the kids are saying, like, oh, my teacher said no one gets an E. No one can achieve an E, but how come my buddy in the other class is getting all E's?
Right.
So, and you may think it's not a big deal, but for kids it is a big deal, because they're comparing themselves all the time. So I don't know if there's any sort of situation where we can straighten that out, or.
Well, it's so, Brent and I behind our masks are smiling right now, because these are conversations we've had with before, with our educators about what is. So some people saying you can't give out, I can't give out a name. And then other teachers, that's just what they by default give out. And so there's been professional development on that. We've had numerous conversations.
There are documents that specifically answer that question for teachers, because they ask it.
But there are reminders. There are reminders that ideally we would be able to do as a big PD. Of course, that was not something we were able to do. But it is a good point, and that's why I don't like to put completed, because there's things I did not think of. You're absolutely right. If I go to my daughter's fourth grade thing, I don't know. It's just there's no way for me to know how that's going, except for some feedback that comes back that I get.
I think the standards-based report cards during COVID probably do present themselves as really challenging for parents to have a good understanding of how their kids are doing at this point. I agree. Under other circumstances, I think we'd be in a better position.
And just to the point that we've mentioned a few times tonight, everyone has a different technology level. And while I have full faith that if something were truly wrong with a student, a teacher would reach out to a parent, there's a big gap between the beginning of school at the end of August, early September, to the first parent-teacher or the only parent-teacher conference in December. So a parent doesn't want to find out 3 months in that their child has a bad study habit or is behind in something, because that's 3 months in that they could have corrected it. So
you've been listening to me then, right? That's one of the things I say all the time. It's really challenging to have a situation where I don't have any feedback, which is what we've been trying to correct. That's why this communication, I don't have any communication, and then all of a sudden, and it could be a whole bunch of different scenarios. I find out in November or early December that my child's performing poorly, but that's September, October, so 3 months in, and I'm finding out that that's a challenge. And I agree. I mean, those are things that we have really asked. If there's a problem, get that communication out. Have a verbal conversation. Don't try to just do an email. Try every way you possibly can. We have, like I think I've mentioned here, about multi-tiered systems of support. Like those are in place. Those students should be identified. There's a process when they're struggling. Even if you're able to not have great communication with the home, there's a process of the team that can come together to help those children. But having home involved in it, it is that critical three of the home, the student, and the classroom. Those three people have to be coming together in order to raise that child up.
So I think what you're talking about too is a communication, home to school communication plan. And that plan would be part of sort of a negotiated agreement, for instance, but it would more clearly define what are the components that go into that. And you've referenced a few of them: parent-teacher conferences, report cards, phone call, email communication, but you can also talk about regular newsletter, posting on campus. So you could essentially define the purpose of each, and then even in a calendar, ensure that they are spread out. So the fact that our conferences correspond very closely with our first term report cards, we don't think is a good practice. That's something we need to change, but it's part of a bigger system that would need to change. So we think they should be spread out a little bit more. And if you question why, you have to know, well, the purpose of a report card is different than the purpose of a conference. And it's different than the purpose of having infinite campus and availability of grades. So you have all of those things, and you have everyone understand the role they serve, and then a schedule of how that would work, so that situation shouldn't happen. Not to say that it still wouldn't, but at least we set up a system that is likely to prevent that from occurring.
Just sketch one up right here.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Chris Redding, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, so it was a follow-up to what Brent had said with regard to really talking to the teachers about the expectations and stuff. And I think that the piece that I think is just as valuable is talking to the students as well. And how do they feel about a lot of these? I don't know that this dialogue is taking place. It may. I mean, Casey would probably know better. To just kind of keep a track of, all these changes that the kids are navigating through, and are they getting the support that they need? Are they kind of feeling like overwhelmed at different times, and who can they talk to, if that's the case? I'm like I worry sometimes we talk so much about other stuff and we never actually look at student achievement. And I think in this year especially, we need to look at student achievement and kind of student, mental health certainly needs to be a high priority this year especially.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Anyone? Is there anyone else who wants to add to the discussion? Thanks, Dr. Lee. And our last agenda item is the COVID update.
Yes. Thank you again, Madam Chair. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share tab. So just I'm going to go over just the COVID numbers, what they look like. So first one we're going to look at is this is the 3 week. So this is where it is town by town. Again, the last report, these come out Thursday at 6 o'clock. I have a meeting every Wednesday with representatives from each town to find out how things are going. And Diane Dardino is part of that. We contract with her. So she has a broad vision of all three where things are. But this is what's official from the state. You can see in Groveland, 63, 74, 80. That's the last 3 weeks. There's an increase of 6, but the good news, there's a drop from 12.18 to 11.5. Obviously, in the red. I can't believe we still use the color system, but we are. It's, now, West Newbury, very different. So West Newbury goes hovering in the low 20s, right? That's where they've been averaging. And their percent positive test rate is pretty much staying right around that 5.2 number. Merrimack, again, in the 50s, been consistently in the 50s, and a slight bump in as with that positive test results as well. So that's that one set of data. We're going to see that again because as I did last time, I am going to share with you how that looks compared to the towns versus schools. So you'll recall, so let's go to Groveland. You recall that what we did was we went ahead what I did was I went ahead and I put in all the data and then used the dashboard to fill in. So this is the case count in the last 14 days, percent supervised test positive, where they would be if they were if we did a color thing from unshaded green, yellow, to red. So again, this is Groveland. Groveland is 11.5% positivity rate, 80 cases. Bagnell, and this is a look back of 14 days. So Bagnell's at 4 positive cases, and that's a 0.8%. The middle school, 6 cases and a 1.58%. And a high school, 17 cases and a 2.27%. And again, every time I look at these, you can look at these as just numbers, or you can know the stories behind them. And when I say you can know the stories behind them, you actually can't know the stories behind them. But that's why I have those meetings on Wednesday, because they do tell me the stories, the general story of why these numbers are where they are. So I know why this is high. And so you can see this trend of, if you look at 9, 3, 5, 16, 17, guess what this is right here? Anybody? The holidays. Yeah, we can see that. And same thing, like it's a 10, 8, and 4. Now this, or a 3, a 7, and 6. Again, it's the holidays. So there was travel where people were moving at that point. So that's over in Groveland. We switch over to West Newbury. So the high school and the middle school are not going to change, but it just compares. So in West Newbury, 5.27, 2 cases a page. So 3,100, 2 cases. So they're up to 0.59%. And that's, again, middle school and high school remain the same. And we look at Merrimack, of course, they have both Sweetser and Donahue. So 8.62%. Sweetser has had 2 cases in the last 2 weeks, so that was about 0.91. And Donahue's had 2 cases, that's 0.87. So relative, and this is relative, we're talking in terms of relativity. That's a very good percentage to be at. 0.87 and 1.5, 2.27. That's a big number. But again, if you know the stories, these make sense. So this should lead us into a question. I'm going to stop sharing this one. Okay, so how are our numbers looking on the dashboard? Of course, you can access the dashboard up on any of the district's websites. But when we take a look at the dashboard, and okay, so this is where we were in December. So you can see, I'm going to go read through the bottom. The first week, 10, 14, 5, 17. Right, that was our big week there at 17. And then when we go into January, 21. So again, 17 and 21. If you look at the high school had 12 on that week, and the high school over here had just 4. So that 12 was a really big number, and that's what's also driving that percentage up. So 21, last week we were at 12. So it's that kind of that dip down. Now this week we're at 3. And this is the end of the day. So just the way this works, it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So we have 3 more days, and right now we have 3 cases. And so, and part of these, so I'll just tell you, when we look at the cases, some of you may know this, but we know we've gone ahead and closed programs. Like right now, there's 2 programs that we have put just on remote for 2 weeks out of caution, just because it just wasn't worth having people come in. So there's 2 small programs that are right now fully remote because it was, yeah, it's just not worth the risk. It's very similar to what we had to do with the pre-K. It's 2 weeks. It's not ideal. It's not what we want to do. But it's what's the safest and what's the smartest. So that dashboard again is available. If you look at the numbers, so high school all the month of December was at 14, and here in January they've already passed that. There's reasons for this. Secondary students are mobile. They move around. They hang out. They do stuff. Elementary students, they do that as well, but not as a great extent. When you don't have a car to drive around, it's not as easy. So that's the data that I just wanted to share with everybody. Didn't know if anybody had any questions on that, but there was one really important bit of information I wanted to share. I know I put it here. So I know a couple months ago, and I just figured this out, there was a question, or someone came out and said, well, your data that you have up on DESE's website is not matching what we've been counting coming out of our school. That is actually correct. It does not match. And there's a reason for it. The reason for it is when there's a confirmed positive case, that case gets sent to me. I call it in to the state, and the state asks me the following questions. They ask me my name, school district, my position, all that. I say, okay, what school? So I give them the name of the school. Is it a student or a staff? If it's staff, they're going to ask, is it a teacher or is it support personnel? If it's a student, they want the grade. The next question they're going to, well, after if it's a student, they're going to get the grade, and student or staff, they want to know if they're teacher or support. The next question they're going to ask, has that person been in the building in the last 7 days? If it's a yes, DESI counts that as a positive in the school. If it's a no, they do not count it. So that's where the difference comes in. Our numbers include the yeses and the nos. DESI's only include the yeses. So I think just for anybody who, I forget, I know a couple of people who have brought that up, but I know that had come up maybe a month or two ago. But that's why there is that discrepancy between those two numbers. And I didn't realize that. I don't know why it didn't occur to me. I didn't realize that until last week when the state sent me a text message just checking, hey, Superintendent, I want to let you know these are the confirmed cases that were in your school in the last 7 days. And that's where the light bulb came on, and that's why that discrepancy exists.
Well, thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. B? Okay, well, I appreciate all the information. I think it's great information. So, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Wayne Adams.
Yes.
Joanna Blanchard. Yes. Emily Dwyer.
Yes.
Michelle Dunn. Yes. Dick Hodges.
Yes.
Chris Martin.
Yes.
Lisa O'Connor.
Yes.
Chris Redding.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good week.
Good night.